What's up, Offworlders? Welcome to another astonishing episode of Offworld Off Topic with me, Sam Paler, and Mark Fox Powell.
Hello.
Really gave the definition to your multiple names.
There's no misunderstanding what my name is there, I don't think.
Right. I should probably say that Offworld Off Topic
is our weekly show.
It's a weekly show.
Yeah. This is episode 10, by the way, just to point that out. Yeah.
It is episode 10.
10 whole episodes.
We've made it through the decade.
Yeah, just clawed our way through.
Yeah. Scraped by.
Yeah, just.
Scraping by again today.
Yeah.
Right. What is it we're doing today?
Well, we're kind of building a bit on last week's conversation about evolution of intelligence.
Yeah.
Sort of. And today we're going to try and answer the question of, we're trying to discuss the question of what separates humans and animals.
Yes.
So, there's a perceived sort of difference between us and an organism like us that's able to build a whole civilization and do all the crazy stuff that we do and make videos of us talking about it. A separation between that and animals.
I.e. a non-civilization building organism and a civilization building organism.
Yes, exactly.
If you want to use that as the dichotomy, as the distinction.
Yeah. So we're going to try and answer that question. What is it actually that causes that gulf? So what defines that separation? That's the tasty topic for the day.
But first, there was some big news in the science world, which I think we should discuss a bit.
Yeah, it's super cool. Gravitational
waves have been finally discovered. A long thought about sort of feature of the universe of Einstein's world. It's the last part of relativity, basically, that's not been proven.
Yeah, sure. So general relativity, everything else has been sort of experimentally or observationally confirmed. Yeah. Apart from this last little bit, gravitational waves.
Yeah.
Which
is cool. So gravitational waves, if anyone doesn't know, are kind of ripples in space-time caused by gravitational bodies that affect gravity. Imagine if you have, say, an analogy that people use for general relativity for the effect of larger masses on space-time tends to be like a sheet stretched out, and you put like a big object on that sheet and it bends it in a certain way, and if you drop something around it, it will spin around that sheet until it hits into it. So that's kind of like a rough kind of approximation.
So something with a lot of mass causes more of a warping effect.
Exactly.
Which means the things fall towards it more readily, which is essentially what gravity is.
Yes.
So I mean, it's a kind of an analogy that we can understand. But
and as an analogy, gravitational waves, when you basically say, as an analogy again, if you drop something onto that sheet, it will ripple. Yeah. And those ripples will propagate out into that sheet. So in a way, Einstein predicted that gravitational waves, if space-time worked in the way he thought, that you would get these wave effects from massive objects.
Yeah, it's not just a massive object on its own, though.
You would be able to detect them from massive objects.
A single object on its own, like the sun or something, though, doesn't create waves. It does. It affects space-time around it, but you need two bodies that are orbiting each other or something like that.
Yeah, you have to have a change, something that would cause like a ripple.
Yeah, the analogy that I read was imagine a dumbbell, like weights, lifting weights.
Yeah.
If you spin that on its axis, right? That's an example of something that wouldn't create gravitational waves.
Yes.
It's the same mass and everything.
Yeah.
But it's spinning like a cylinder spinning, essentially. Wouldn't create gravitational waves. But if you rotate it around it's up the other
big
axis,
masses.
That would. So two planets orbiting like a sun, two massive suns, like a binary star system or something, would potentially make gravitational waves, or two giant black holes or something like that, orbiting each other.
Yeah, and that's indeed what they discovered, was two black holes orbiting.
Yeah, and the more mass they have, and the more rapidly they move, the more magnitude of waves, ripples that you get out of it, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So there's loads of, first of all, that's just another confirmation that Einstein's relativity works in the universe. For example, if we didn't discover gravitational waves, we looked down to the sensitivities we would expect to see them.
Yeah.
Then you might be able to start saying things like, maybe space-time doesn't work quite in the way that Einstein thought.
Yeah.
As in, everything else works in his theories, but he doesn't produce waves, so maybe there's some kind of weird interaction going on. Now that we've discovered them, you pretty much have to, although we did already, but assume that it's in every measurable way right.
Yeah.
which is slightly problematic again for physics because
it falls apart at small scales.
Yes, it does. But there's other theories that it's not like our understanding of the universe was riding on whether this was true or not. It's just that there's going to have to be some sort of paradigm shift.
For sure,
to explain everything. But it means that we're going to be able to maybe kind of explore the universe in a new way.
Use them as a sort of a way of like observing objects that we don't have at the moment, because at the moment all the observations we make of the universe are based on the electromagnetic spectrum, so light waves basically. And
now
there's problems involved with that, like they get absorbed by things and they get like refracted and changed and like all this stuff.
Exactly. And there's, it just basically gives us like a new method.
Yeah, gives a new method. So like when another like degree of freedom, like another like set of measurements that we can use
to visualize or measure parts of the universe. Potentially things. Well, I don't know if it gives us any like more scope for expanding our like view of the universe. I don't think it does particularly.
What
it
you
gives
mean,
you like more resolution,
like actually expanding the observable universe? I'm not sure.
I don't think it. Don't know. Well, they propagate the speed of light, don't they? Gravitational waves. So
yeah, do they?
I think.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know.
I think isn't that like the difference between like Newton and Einstein? Newton thought it would happen like instantly, and Einstein said it actually happens at the speed of light, like gravitational influence or something. Like interactions. I don't know. I'm not a physicist, but
I don't know. But if it was the speed limited to the speed of light, then of course, like the observable universe would be exactly the same size, because that's what defines the observable universe.
Yeah, exactly. But in the same way we discovered loads of new things about galaxies and like phenomena using X-rays instead of we did when we used just visible light.
Yeah,
we'll gain a huge amount potentially of information from using gravitational waves to visualize things. But obviously this is like early days technology, so we've only just discovered it using these kind of laser interferometers.
Yeah. Which is actually, if you look into like how the amount of like, basically what happens is these gravitational waves like propagate through the Earth, or like not through the Earth, but like through the space time that the Earth is embedded in. You get like essentially like a stretching and squashing effect. But like the amount that it stretches and squashes,
which changes the time in which the laser bounces forward and back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Along a vacuum.
But the amount that it does that is so unbelievably tiny. Yeah. Like it blew my mind a bit. It's like the fraction of the diameter of a proton or something.
Yeah, it's like a hundredth of the diameter of a proton.
Which is like, I mean, when you think about that, it's completely unsurprising that they haven't discovered it until now.
Yeah.
Because that is, I mean, how the hell do you sort that out of all the other crap that's going on?
Well, that's why it's taking so long.
Yeah.
Very
so
tricky.
there's like two of these interferometers like on opposite sides of the United States, right? Like so like separated by lots of land space in between. And
they basically looked and detected a gravitational wave, which was so similar to the like modelled theoretical thing they were looking for that they thought it. Initially, the people who were looking at it thought it was some sort of error, actually not an error, but some sort of deliberately embedded signal they were doing like blind tests with it, and they thought it was like a signal that they've not been told about. And when they checked it back and talked to the people who were embedding these signals, said no, that's what we've been looking for. And it's like,
nah, come on, really, really,
it's like identical to what they were expecting.
There's a picture of it somewhere, some of the articles and stuff of those, like the comparison between like the modelled signal and the recorded signal. Of at least one of the examples of it, and it's like, I mean, it's the same basically.
Yes, it's like just it's a bit more sort of noise and kind of but it's just exactly the way it sort of the amplitude changes and the way the wavelength changes and everything is just exactly the same. Like the pattern's exactly the same. It's really cool. So they've got this early instrument now that they've just developed to detect these things. But I think that can only detect things with a certain like wavelength and amplitude. Right. So you're going to have to probe like different parts. So certain things like neutron stars and other things would produce like a different set of gravitational waves that wouldn't be able to be detected by this LIGO thing.
There's going to be like a whole spectrum of like wavelengths and like frequencies of gravitational waves that like things, different things that correspond to.
Yeah, like sound waves or light waves.
That's mad. So there's going to be like probably like characteristic patterns that are given off by certain like objects or certain events and things like that. Man, that's so fucking cool.
And there'll be like, it's very hard, but you'd have to potentially build like one of these things like in space, maybe to a space telescope version of it, which would be very difficult because they would be able to do it properly at some point, but it's because at the moment it's so hard to build these things like with the like detection limits they're looking at, that having to pack all that up and get it right in one go and then sending it up is really, really tricky, because they've had to make so many adjustments to LIGO, like going back and forth fixing like the tiniest little things.
So it sounds like the kind of thing that's going to need to be developed considerably on Earth before we get to the point of like
sticking one in
launch
space.
something into space.
But yeah, potentially there's a whole new like method of probing the universe now, which is going to lead to some cool stuff. They might be able to image things and kind of, I don't know how it works, but they'll be
build up some weird like gravitational.
Be able to look at like the way stuff clusters around, like galaxies cluster around dark matter, in
dark
like, different
matter,
ways,
yeah. Oh man,
using gravitational waves.
That's going to be really cool. And look at it on some of the largest scales, like the overall like large scale structure of the universe and things. Maybe might be able to like probe that in some way with gravitational waves. You know, the other week we were talking about warp bubbles.
Oh yeah, what in
a ship that this concept of like a ship that could bend space time.
Yeah, I think we talked about like M drives and all that kind of.
Yeah,
was it in that episode?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a ship that can travel, potentially move itself through the universe faster than the speed of light by bending space time. I wonder if that would send off gravitational waves. I don't know.
Yeah, it would.
It's a thing that's warping space time, which is what surely like a massive object does.
It would like, you imagine like a boat going through water.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah,
like,
so I wonder if you could like.
It would definitely
detect that.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, presumably,
like detect like an alien.
Obviously, that's going to be tiny in comparison to the output
from like a black
massive
hole. Yeah, that's true.
But
hidden somewhere in these like already absolutely minuscule signals, maybe
artificial
there's like
gravitational waves.
Gravitational waves that are a consequence of like alien faster than light vehicles.
Yeah, but I mean, that's if you think about it though. I mean, we don't see anything in the visible spectrum, which is way more basic technology.
That's very true.
If we don't see anything in the visible spectrum, then it seems even less likely we're going to see something in a gravitational wave spectrum.
Yeah, that's very true.
Because unless they would have probably have been outputting, although unless that's how you travel when you get to after like being around for a few million years as a civilization or whatever.
Yeah, but you still expect that whoever's doing the traveling would be emitting like in the visible or in the radio or something like that we'd also see, or like just generally the evidence of them would be like around.
You'd expect that.
But yeah, still.
But what I'm saying is like you might have like a civilization. Say how old is civilization on Earth? Like 10,000 years old or something ish.
Yeah,
50, whatever.
Sure.
Say after 1 million years of civilization, which is quite like a small like period of the universe's lifetime. You emit light waves for a certain amount of time, and then for a much longer period of time, you don't really emit much in the visible spectrum. It all tends to be like gravitationally. That's just absolute bollocks.
Yeah.
But, maybe that's therefore a better way to look for civilizations, because for a longer period of time they're emitting stuff in like a gravitational wave spectrum. I'm obviously it's probably nonsense.
Who knows? I mean, it's cool to think about at least.
It's cool to think about.
Yeah. Cool. So gravitational waves could lead us to lots of cool places potentially.
Yeah, definitely going to be some new science coming out of that stuff. It's going to be a while before they kind of build like new ones and stuff, but absolutely,
those guys must have been celebrating pretty hard.
Probably going to be a Nobel Prize.
Good question. Possibly, yeah.
I think so.
I reckon, yeah.
How the hell are they going to? They've got to pick 3 people to give the Nobel Prize to.
Out of the team of people that,
which is like the author list of these things are like 3,000.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And that's like, even that's cutting people out probably.
Yeah. I don't know. There might be some PIs that would get it. Anyway, they're gonna have to make some people unhappy basically with that decision. Probably.
But I imagine that's going to get the Nobel Prize for physics. It's also like way within the number of the sigma limit, the 5 sigma limit of like a discovery. It's like 7 or something. I can't remember. It's basically a big tick.
Yeah, cool. So that'll probably happen.
So yeah, this year probably Nobel Prize.
Yeah,
we'll go to that for physics. When are the Nobel Prizes announced?
I've got no idea. I have absolutely no idea.
No. Okay. Yeah.
It's usually like more than it probably won't be this year. These things usually take a little while to well, the happen, thing is, right?
Well, the Higgs one took a while to happen because the sigma limit wasn't like high enough quite. Yeah. But then when it was,
yeah, I still think it's usually like a few years after the big like event, big discovery.
Is it?
I think so.
Well, the Higgs wasn't though. As soon as they did it that year, he got it.
Yeah, but he didn't make the discovery. Like he was being awarded for something that he did like years before.
Yeah, but he got awarded it the year they made the discovery.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So maybe it will be
Maybe it will be.
this
Maybe it will be.
cycle.
Yeah,
Because they've been doing the nominations recently, haven't they? Donald Trump got like someone putting in a nomination for him to get the Peace Prize or something insane.
Restoring peace to the galaxy. Donald Trump.
Right. Let's do the main topic.
The main topic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So on a very different note. So
change course.
Change course. Again, there's some space stuff. We're kind of trying to figure out what separates, like I was saying, a civilization building organism from a non-civilization building organism. So it's like thinking about life again as a property of the universe, as a physical feature of the universe. So it's spacey in a way.
Yeah, because well, hopefully what we're going to talk about could be like applied to like any planet that has complex life on it, right?
Exactly. Trying to take it in those terms.
Yeah.
Although again, we're stuck with
what we have here.
As an example, which is the inevitable problem.
Which might be like incredibly unusual and unique. We don't know.
Yes, yeah, and you know, one of millions or billions of different ways it could happen. No idea, but we can only speculate, and speculating's fun.
Yeah,
so
it's really fun.
Right. So I think what we need to sort of start with is thinking about some of the things that are commonly used to differentiate humans and animals.
Yeah, because for a long time, you know, people have been putting forward, you know, saying that we're clearly different. Like we are people. Like the concept of just the concept of like us and them. Like we're humans and they're animals.
Yes,
is like just so ingrained in like everyone's sort of thinking. That,
absolutely. Yeah.
So like so we need to sort of like maybe pull that apart a bit and find out like what are the different
really
aspects that people quite often use to distinguish us from animals.
So what we're really asking, is there like a unique trait or behaviour that is not seen in any way in animals, but that is seen in humans?
Yeah.
And, well, we'll go through some of the common ones and then...
There's definitely some candidates that we can talk about.
There are. There are some... That's a good way of putting it. Some candidate traits.
Yeah.
So... A common thing that people talk about is, and obviously, depending on who's watching this, they will have already either ruled this out or whatever. They might think this. But we'll go through some of the kind of basic ones, which we think are probably like definitely not true. Yeah. I think some of them are definitely not true.
Certainly, yeah.
So things like emotions. So a lot of people say that I would say a lot of misinformed people say that animals just act only on instinct.
Purely on instinct, yeah.
So they don't have any like emotions. Yeah. It's all just like mechanical behavior.
Yeah, and like emotion is like a purely human trait.
Yes. So to feel sadness, to feel depression, happiness,
like love.
Love.
Like even like empathy, maybe you could fold into that.
Do altruistic like behaviors.
Yeah, sure. I mean, immediately that's like altruism exists in many other animals, and that's not like that's I mean, that's certainly not something that could be even argued as a uniquely human trait. Yeah.
So if we look at the animal world, do we have examples then, specific like species or like types of animals that exhibit, say, like empathetic behaviors to it, or like obviously have emotions when other animals die?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like elephants, for example, like massively mourn their dead.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And, you know, like spend ages kind of after they've died, like standing by them, like almost just like doing like a vigil or something, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, I mean, there's stories of elephants, and like not just sort of like anecdotal stories, as in studies of watching and observing elephant behaviour, where they'll... like one of the big females will die or something, and the elephants will surround them and like cover them in like leaves and stuff and like branches, and just wait for days, like essentially mourning the dead animal. And only go off for food and water and come back. And it takes a long time for them to eventually leave.
And what is that if it's not an emotional response to that death? Yeah,
because there's no it's one of those things. There's no benefit in terms of your immediate survival for getting food, for getting water, for reproduction, that kind of comes out of that, aside from the benefit to the society of elephants.
Yes.
As in treating each individual as a valuable like member of that elephant society.
Yeah.
Another example is you see that chimps. You see there's
Yeah,
loads.
yeah,
there's loads of examples and quite horrible videos of very upset like chimps like mourning the loss of a dead baby chimp or a dead relative or something that's been injured. Trying to care for them. These types of things. You see it in dogs.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's going to say like anyone who has a dog has spent a while with a dog, like they have emotions. You can see that, like they respond to like your emotions. They can get like sad. They can get like angry. They can be scared.
Moody.
Yeah, they can be a bit sort of like.
If you've ever owned a pet, you just know that the start of this, like the whole concept of this, is just nonsense. That they're totally not.
Yeah.
And obviously there's like levels to this. So some animals are, when you get down to like really basic levels, are like really very, very kind of like instinctive and not.
Yeah, like a spider or something.
Yeah.
A spider's like working on a very, very stripped down brain.
Exactly.
So it doesn't have the capacity probably to have such complex emotions. But I mean, emotions, the kind of research on emotions, they are quite. In terms of like all the rest of our like higher brain functions and the kind of complex processing that our brains do, emotions are actually quite basic in terms of they're quite physiological. There's often like a strong chemical driver behind them.
Exactly. Yeah, you'll see spikes in blood levels of different.
Yeah, exactly, like hormones and all kinds of stuff. So there's actually like quite a strong branch of thinking, which is that emotions are actually some of the more basic forms of our brains, of our brain function.
Absolutely.
And actually tie back to like have their evolutionary history in the very things that people talk about animals purely having, which is instinct.
Yeah.
So like for example, like something like fear could be thought of as an emotion, but it arises from like an animal instinct, essentially.
A fight or flight kind of adrenaline rush. So some emotions are kind of more complex, obviously, or have evolved from more social interactions between animals. So obviously some like fear are very basic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was like a really basic example.
Yeah,
to illustrate that.
It's just exactly. So some altruistic emotions, the need to help something else from your species, doesn't exist obviously in more basic life forms that aren't sort of socially.
Yeah, sure.
Don't have a social necessity in their biology or their behaviour.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So you get more. There's kind of different levels of emotions in terms of how primitive and non-primitive they are. But I see what you're saying.
So the point is what I just said is that this argument that some people put forward that like emotions are a human trait and that animals act purely on instinct. Actually, there's thinking that those emotions that they're describing are actually the instinct that the animals are acting on. So I mean, obviously more complex evolved forms of it, but there's a thread you can trace back.
Yes.
That is actually more like. What am I trying to say? Like the emotion, the instincts the animals are acting on are basically rudimentary forms of emotion.
Yes.
And that actually like logical thinking and stuff is more of a human trait than emotion.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah.
Or certainly a trait, of higher intelligences.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So emotions, there's no evidence whatsoever for emotions being uniquely human.
No.
No, not at all.
No.
There's every evidence to suggest the closer you get to humans from any species, go up to primates, the closer you get to emotion, to a human level complexity in emotions.
Yeah.
So emotions, no, that doesn't differentiate.
Scratch that off the list.
Get rid of that. So what about things like
language?
Like language, language.
I mean, language is just a form of communication, right? Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of other animal species that communicate with each other.
Yes.
Like vocally, in terms of like wolves.
The dogs.
Yeah.
Howling.
And dogs. Yeah, dogs. Although actually, people say that
I've seen a dog talk.
What?
On like YouTube videos.
Oh yeah.
It said, I don't know. It said like there was I used to have a teacher that had a dog that apparently used to be obsessed with eating lemons. And it was a weird dog. It would eat lemons, okay, and its mouth would swell up from all the like sourness of the lemon. But it used to like it.
What a crazy
And what
dog.
it used to do when it wanted the lemons was sort of yelp the word lemons. Kind of like trying to yelp lemons, and they go and get
it's like addicted
lemon
to them like crack or something.
She was South African, and they used to have lemon trees in their garden. They used to live in South Africa. And the dog wanted lemons. They'd pick a lemon and give it to the dog. Weird.
I mean, that's a dog using like human language.
Yeah, it's like he's obviously
Kind of.
yes, it is, but it's like a parrot learns to mimic something.
Yeah.
A bit, or maybe a bit smarter than that.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, there's dogs. They don't communicate normally, but they don't have a proper voice box to do.
Yeah, they don't.
That's
like,
why it was
speak
sort of
English
squealing
normally.
at lemons.
Yeah,
rather
yeah,
than-
yeah. It's possible. I wonder if it had been trained sort of to do that though, like to make
Possibly.
that sound. Maybe I don't know.
I don't know. But certainly they communicate with howling, with
Howling
with
with each other.
yelping,
Like
kind of.
wolf packs communicate with howling, definitely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And they have like developed like different types of howling, like language howling, like varieties in that howling compared
Yes.
to where different species of wolves, and not just within species as well, like almost cultures of wolves
Yeah.
that have their own distinct languages despite being the same species because they've been isolated by spatially.
And another really good example of that is whales and
Yeah,
whales and dolphins.
Yeah.
Like pods of orcas and stuff have distinctive calls and songs and stuff that are distinct from other groups in different parts of the world.
Yes.
So you can they almost have like their own dialects and things like that, and they have different calls to mean different things.
Yeah.
Like hunting calls and various other things like that. So there's plenty of examples of like vocal language.
Yeah.
But there's like other like forms of communication, obviously, like pheromones in ants.
Yes. Like flashing lights.
Flashing lights in various marine
Squids and
things,
stuff.
like cuttlefish
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah.
There's
There's loads of like fish that I think fish communicate bioluminescent fish like in the deep ocean.
Yeah.
How do fish communicate? Do they communicate?
some do. There's this one species of fish that communicate by in like big schools, very
Right.
rudimentary communication by big shoals, schools, whatever, by like letting out little puffs of gas.
Oh.
Which is really strange.
Flying.
Yes. And the researchers that discovered it made an acronym for it that literally is FART. I can't remember exactly what it
that's
stands
great.
for, but it's like the paper and everything. I was taught about it, when I was doing my undergrad and everything.
Yeah.
And it's in the title of the paper. It's like FART. But yeah, it's basically a form of communication.
So fish have some rudimentary forms of communication.
Yeah.
Um,
So I mean, that it exists across the animal kingdom,
and is able to be culturally passed down.
Yes.
and diverges within separate species.
Yes.
So
I guess there's an argument that language is separate from, well, not separate from, but like, language is just a more complex form of communication, right? It's just there's more to it. There's more layers.
So
more
like those fish puffing stuff up
complexity.
their ass.
Yeah.
Like they're like in different regions might have like they might have slightly different like timings in those puffs of gas that mean the same thing, but would mean different things to different fish. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe not in fish, but certainly in things like whales and wolves and like higher animals.
Yes, and that's sort of been shown, and even with like apes, like
But that's
chimps and
language,
stuff.
isn't it? Even if like
It's
puffs of
language.
gas are at different times, but they mean different things, different places. That is language.
If there's like an information coded into it in some way, then
Yeah.
that's language.
Sure, yeah,
Definitely.
And the language is the idea that it's not universal, right? That you have there's not a differentiation between.
Oh, like a language in terms of like French and English, or like,
Yeah.
Is that
Well,
part of the
maybe-
definition of a language, that you have to have like local? I mean,
Don't know.
it's probably something that inevitably always is going to arise if you have some form of group communication, and then not too much mixing between groups.
Yeah.
Like you see, like French and English, and like any language in human language, but also when you see in whale populations having different.
But
songs
like
and
that's
stuff.
if you don't know, if you haven't read much about it or whatever, then some people would assume that kind of barking is the same everywhere, or that, that there aren't these like separate passed down identities to animal communication, which you could define as like different languages.
Yes. Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah.
So language, I think we can cross that off.
Yeah.
As in, obviously, human language is far more complex.
Yeah,
and
and that's true. Of what, I mean, most of what we're talking about here is that we exhibit just a very complicated version of all these things.
Yes.
But it's certainly not something that we have uniquely.
Yeah. These are some of these are some of the sort of more obvious, more easy ones.
Yeah, like
so
technology.
Technology, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So like obviously, I mean that's almost like the most obvious thing. If you came to the Earth and looked at the Earth, and you saw a bunch of animals and a bunch of humans, like the kind of the main difference you'll be immediately apparent is technology.
Yeah.
You have technology, they don't, basically.
But not true.
Yeah, not true. Plenty of animals have technology.
Yeah, obviously, again, very rudimentary.
Yeah, in like a very, very general definition of the word technology. Just purely like something that makes a task easier, basically.
Yeah. Using something that's not one of your like appendages,
Yeah.
that's like kind of an inanimate object to achieve a goal
Yeah.
in a more effective way than you would have just by using part of your body
Yeah.
or an animal's body.
Yeah, that's tech.
So like apes, sticks, stick them in a termite nest, pull them out, get those tasty ants off.
Yeah. Nice little skewer.
There's
of
like
termites.
videos of chimps running around like the dominant males like doing a sort of like show.
Yeah.
He's like getting angry and they're all kind of like loving it, watching him. And he'll find like fuel tanks taken from like human villages, like empty like metal fuel, and use them to like bang around and make more noise, like a drummer or something.
Chimps are awesome.
Yeah, and another example which I think is really interesting is crows and those types of
crows
birds.
are awesome.
Again, they use sticks to achieve certain goals.
Yeah.
Again, for like
Like
insects
poking them
and
into
things.
holes in trees and stuff, right? To
Yeah.
like, get out insects.
But they do madder stuff than that,
Yeah.
crows, and so do apes. In fact, before we talk about crows, you told me a story once about that monkey that like grabbed a bottle and wanted to trade it. I mean, this is sort of tools.
yeah.
Yes.
It's sort of tools. It's
Just
definitely
tell the
like,
anecdote anyway.
it's definitely like a
cool.
demonstration of street like intelligence and like problem solving.
Yeah.
Basically, I went to like a chimpanzee sanctuary in South Africa, and there was this like enclosure, like it's massive enclosure. It was like the size of like a forest fenced in, where they kept the adult chimps.
That's like Jurassic Park.
Yeah. They were rehabilitating them basically after like they'd all been abused. Like, I don't know.
Something horrible.
Yeah, they've been rescued from various places and they're rehabilitating them. So they were in this massive pen, and the guide woman who was showing us around had a water bottle.
Yeah.
And when she was talking to us by the adult chimp enclosure, she put it on the ground right by the fence, and as soon as she put it down and let go of it, one of the adult chimps had it like under the fence, like just grabbed it and ran off with it. And like they were, I don't know, there's probably about 10 or so of these things, and they were just screaming like like throwing it into the air and like running up and down trees and like just going absolutely mental, just like running
Just
around,
loving the water bottle.
yeah, like smashing the ground with their hands and stuff and just
God.
screaming. They're so loud.
Yeah.
Pretty like scary actually. Like
Yeah,
you see loads of adult chimps going mental.
Powerful
like that.
beasts.
But then she had to trade to get it back. So she had like treats, like nuts, I think it was.
Oh yeah.
And so she had to, in order to get the bottle back, she had to like give a nut to this chimp through the fence. But it didn't just give her the bottle back. It took the lid off of the bottle and gave her that, and then asked for another nut to get the second nut back.
That's so clever.
I know, and it's that's demonstrating all kinds of like things, like the concept of like bargaining and stuff, and
Yeah, like social, like evolutionary game theory, like intelligence game theory,
Yeah.
like social game theory.
yeah,
In a like a very much like game type environment
Yeah,
rather than
absolutely.
like a social, communicative context.
Yeah.
But they weren't trained. Were they trained to do
Well,
that?
that's the thing. I don't know.
Don't know.
It was made to seem like it just happened.
Sure.
But it might be that
They've learned that behaviour.
they've learned that behaviour.
Or one of them has taught it and then passed it on or something.
Yeah. Or that she just does. That happened once one day, and now she just does it every day to every tour group that comes.
Yeah.
out, that
Well,
comes
if it
through.
happened
If it
spontaneously.
if it happens
then that's-
spontaneously, then that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't surprise, like the stuff I've heard about, like what chimps do. It wouldn't surprise me that if that was like a spontaneous thing that had happened.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually, on the subject, just before I talk about crows, about on chimps. Have you ever seen that? This is about language, I suppose, more. But have you ever seen that that documentary where they have like a bunch of bonobos and they teach them symbols to like that mean like certain things? And this guy
I've heard of this kind of stuff, but
yeah, and they press these symbols, and
Yeah.
the symbols mean stuff. Like there's a sort of a chart for the presenter to look through and talk to this bonobo. And the bonobo is sort of sitting there. A bonobo is like a type of chimpanzee, isn't it?
yeah, it is. Yeah,
And it sits there, and he asks it like a question of like some of these things. And
Yeah.
the bonobo like presses these things back,
As like
like
an
how
answer.
are you, as an answer, because it knows it's been trained to know how to do this.
Yeah.
And like you get like a sentence back that like's made up of these symbols. So like it literally comes out as like text, "I'm fine, thank you," or something like that.
That's bizarre.
And then he's just sat there like talking to this bonobo, just looking at it and just like pressing these buttons, and the bonobo's like answering his questions by pressing in like a very
I mean, that's like he's having a conversation with a chimp there, with a bonobo.
presumably, yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of like they teach or have been able to teach gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos like sign language and things like that.
Yeah.
And obviously they can't have like conversations about like abstract concepts and stuff, but
No,
they are capable of answering questions about themselves.
Yeah.
Or asking for food, asking to go outside or whatever, just like sort of basic stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Definitely.
Anyway, so in terms of tool use, crows. Crows can do loads of cool stuff as well. So they, like we said, they use sticks and stuff, but they also crows have like different cultures of using certain tools. So for example, there was I think it might have been like Belgium or something weird. Like it's a group. I can't remember exactly where it was, but a group of crows learned a way to open a specific like seed or nut or something that they wanted to use, that they wanted to eat, and they couldn't do it with their beaks. They don't have very strong beaks.
Sure.
They're not like parrots or something. And so what they did is they worked out that you could drop the nuts onto roads and cars would run them over.
Oh, I think I heard about this.
And they realised that obviously that the car would run over, you would get the nut out, you'd be able to eat it. Problem is that it was dangerous because these cars are flying past and some of the crows might get injured or would have no doubt got injured or killed.
Yeah, sure.
So the crows began to drop them. They realised that the cars would stop at certain regions and that there would be like an area where they could drop them where they would be less likely to get hurt.
Like traffic lights.
So they dropped them at zebra crossings, which are really like visually obvious like regions.
Yes.
And so they drop them there. They'd get run over, and then when the lights went, you'd literally have like some crows waiting for the lights to go. People start going, they'd fly down, grab the nut, and fly off. Like really, really kind of bizarre.
Yeah. That's crazy
behavior. That's just so smart for a bird.
Yeah.
And I mean, lots of birds are smart, but you kind of think of birds as kind of stupid. Like ostriches
do.
are so stupid.
Yeah. They're kind of, a lot of birds look at like pretty dumb, like chickens. Just have sort of a dead look behind their eyes.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and then sort of the movements they make is they're quite far from humans. Obviously, they've got a very different evolutionary history, so they feel intuitively not that smart. But they're very capable of using tools.
It's quite weird it's quite hard to compare like how like a crow would fit into mammalian intelligence, like what it would compare to in the mammal sort of continuum of intelligence.
Yes.
Whether it would be comparable to like a dog, possibly more intelligent than a dog if it's doing stuff like that.
Well, there's always a problem with trying to compare intelligences between like things
quite
like from cephalopods up to non-avian avian dinosaurs to mammals, because they have such different evolutionary histories.
Yeah, well, at least birds and mammals have like a common ancestor. Well,
they have a more recent.
Their brains certainly have come. The common ancestor of birds and mammals had a brain already at that point.
Yes.
Whereas
no, it didn't with cephalopods.
Not with cephalopods. No. So the brains that cephalopods have, like octopus and squid and all that stuff, is like it's like totally. Has a totally separate evolutionary history from our brain.
Is it? They don't really have a centralized brain at all.
Not really. No, it's this weird like
each
they have
nodes.
They have nodes, interconnected nodes.
Are there neurons? Is it like an example of where it sort of repeats itself? Evolution. What's that called?
Convergent evolution.
Yes. Yeah. Convergent evolution. Yeah.
Yes.
So do they have neurons? And stuff? Yes. Or do they have something analogous to neurons?
Yeah, they have neurons. I'm not sure if it was squid and cuttlefish, cephalopods, or if it was jellyfish now. And if it was jellyfish, obviously they're a whole different like.
Yeah, that's just a bunch of like microbes stuck together, basically. Yeah.
That there was evidence that the neurons that they had, or the neuron-like cells that they had, had emerged like after the common ancestor with like us.
Yes.
So that basically what that means. So their
common ancestor had no neurons at all.
Yeah, so the common ancestor had no neurons.
Individually evolved twice.
Yeah, exactly.
From separated organisms.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's not surprising that stuff happens all over the place all the time.
Yeah, with wings, bats, wings, really flight's common.
Flights evolved like 5 times,
loads of times.
Separately. Over the course of
eyes as well, I think.
Yeah,
like visual systems.
Visual systems.
Have evolved
obviously
totally.
Legs.
Yeah, movement systems.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Those kinds of
There's
things,
loads of
does
examples.
make you. Yeah, exactly. It's like, in a way, sort of strengthens the arguments that you maybe get like a certain intelligent type of spirit. We were talking about last week.
Yeah,
like a civilization building organism would look roughly the same.
Yes. Yes,
because if again it goes back to that what life is and like whether it's based on DNA and stuff. If it is, then you might not be surprised. You might be shocked at how similar some of the things look.
If it has a different molecule underlying it, you still might find that you get convergent evolution to a certain point.
Yeah, you might.
If it undergoes evolution in a similar environment to us, it will come up with find similar solutions to the various problems that it would have.
Yeah, because it's still ruled by the same chemistry and the same physics.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the same, we know planets like Earth, exist. So it's not a surprise.
Yeah, exactly.
That they might look the same. Anyway, that's a tangent.
Yeah, but it's cool. So technology use, like use of tools and stuff to make life easier.
Definitely not.
It's definitely not just uniquely human.
Obviously,
we're just really, really, really good at it.
By miles the best at it.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the biggest... There's a separator in the sense that we are so much better than anything else at using technology. Same with language. Our language is so much more complicated in terms of like the abstract kind of forms of it in comparison to other animals.
Yeah. And what you can represent in human language is crazy compared to like the rudimentary just like basic survival kind of needs that animal languages probably have. They probably don't have abstract concepts like buried in there. Well, we don't know. Don't know.
But yes, so tick that one off the list, cross that one off the list.
I think so. So all the stuff that we've just been talking about, like technology use, language, emotion, even all this stuff, it's quite easy to see how those traits might have emerged in like animals, and then also in us, obviously through evolution and natural selection.
So you mean like So in terms of why they are traits that you would want to select, why they benefit an organism in reproducing.
Yeah.
So language obviously benefits an organism because if you can communicate with other organisms that are in your species, you can develop ways in which to tackle problems or group together, communicate, basically end up doing...
like sharing information about better ways to hunt or find food is ultimately going to benefit everybody.
Yes.
Because everyone can then has that information and can go and use it and build on it and whatever.
Exactly.
And similar with like tool use and things like that.
Exactly. Obviously, tool use allows you to have access to resources you wouldn't otherwise have access to.
Yeah.
So you can see how that got selected. An animal that could pick up a stick and get ants is going to have a better chance at surviving and reproducing than one that can't, because it has no food supply in that sense from ants.
Yeah, and even emotion, like if you have like a strong emotional reaction to something, like fear. I mean, I know fear is a very basic example, but it's easy to sort of imagine how that could be like emerged through evolution. Obviously, like fear is absolutely essential.
But same with emotions like empathy, though, like more complex.
Yeah.
I mean, a society of animals doesn't work properly if you don't have a concept of understanding the position of others. So empathetic. Emotions. Otherwise, you basically are like a bunch of psychopaths, and
everyone will try and cheat that system.
Exactly, the game theory, the game of like evolution. The game of a society. As in game theory. You wouldn't be able to detect cheaters and everything. It would be a mess. All the bargaining tools you use in society to find mates, to bargain for resources, all these types of things necessitate an understanding of the emotions of another animal. And therefore you have to have things like empathy, you have to have complex emotions in more societal, like driven higher animals.
Exactly. Sort of as we were talking about last week, like as the society gets more complex, the kind of the interactions become more complex, so you kind of need a more complex sort of emotional basis to kind of run that society. But there are some things that humans exhibit that aren't so obviously selectable, if you want, for a better word, like haven't so obviously emerged from an evolutionary process, and maybe aren't as present in other animals because of that.
That on the surface appear to be pointless for trying to better your role as a breeding organism. So trying to pass on your information, your genetic information. So humans do like loads of bizarre things like paint, like art
generally. So like painting, like music, like making films. I don't know, all this stuff. Like, what purpose does it serve? In an evolutionary context. And is that an example of something that differentiates us? The fact that we have this trait.
So this stuff is now going to get more tricky.
Because
it's not so clear cut. I mean, for a start, there are some animals which in a kind of borderline is it art, is it not?
It's I mean, for a start, art is like when you start thinking about
art is a hard definition anyway.
It is, and it's a bit crazy when you start thinking about it. What we do, like.
I'm gonna look up a quick definition.
Sure, go for it. So it's such a weird like trait to have, a behavioural trait to have. Like just going out of your way to, you know, do a painting or something just purely because it looks good and other humans think it looks good.
Yeah, so the definition of art, according to, I mean, this is maybe not be the definition, it's just the one that first came up. The various branches of creative activity such as painting, music, literature, and dance. So, I mean, that doesn't really...
It's creativity, though, isn't it? Like, that's kind of what it is.
Well,
right?
it's creativity... You could define creativity, though, in still, like, a creative hunting method.
Sure, or like science is, like, highly creative as well.
Yeah,
sometimes.
I just mean in terms of... That doesn't create any art.
Yes.
In a sense.
Yeah, so scientific creativity doesn't create art under that definition of
under
art.
that definition.
But
creativity is used in... Just like a leopard trying to work out, like, a creative way of trying to, like, separate a young animal from the pack.
Yeah,
there's some creativity there.
And that actually like strikes almost to the heart of like why it possibly exists as an evolutionary emergence like property.
Yes,
because if you are creative, like if you are a creative human, then you're probably going to be good at solving problems that are like necessary to your survival.
Yes,
like hunting, like whatever. So art is like possibly a way of advertising that creativity.
Quite possibly.
I mean, we're talking here, and like obviously, you know, someone who does a painting or like writes some music or something, they aren't thinking in these terms at all.
No,
of
course.
This is just a way of explaining like how it could possibly have emerged through evolution, in the same way that like any other animal behavior does.
Yes. If you consider humans like back out a second and consider them as an objective species, you're like looking under a microscope and seeing some humans like behaving in certain ways. You've got to kind of consider them in that sense to try and really get to the nub of why people are doing things. People clearly they do art because they enjoy doing it, or they want to do it. But like, why do they want to do it? Is a question that potentially has an answer in evolution. Say potentially, I mean there's no reason why everything else.
Yeah, to suggest that it has come from some other just like a spark of creativity was put into humans somehow for no reason is like, well, that goes against everything that we understand about science and our biology and evolution.
Exactly, as if there was something that was kind of suddenly appeared, a magic ingredient that suddenly appeared at some point when we were kind of moving from apes to humans. Clearly, there's a gradational boundary there and a big difference between the two, but the processes driving them have not changed, as in we're still biological organisms.
Yeah, sure.
And therefore are driven by our biological processes. Obviously there's loads of like socially inducted behaviors and processes that affect our biology. It's not to say that it's all nature, not nurture. It's absolutely a mix of both of them.
Yeah, sure.
But in terms of understanding these kind of traits in a sense, as if you're looking at humans as a species, then there's no reason to suspect that creativity is
some like spooky like extra ingredient that's been mixed into the mix.
Do we see anything? So that's not really. We're talking about creativity there.
Yeah.
But art is an outlet of creativity.
Yes.
And we can see like why certain creative traits, so creatively hunting or whatever, would benefit organisms. Yeah. But why is there any? If you could separate, if you were saying that you were separating animals from humans based on the fact that humans create art, is there any examples in which in animals in which you can see a somewhat rudimentary version of art in any shape or form? Not just creativity, like as in making like artistic things.
Yeah. Well, kind of. I mean, you kind of have to stretch it a little bit.
You do.
There's certainly some animals have some weird behaviors, but they are usually tied directly to reproductive sex.
Yes.
So, like, I mean, this is like in the same way that like a peacock has like a shitload of massive feathers on its tail.
Yeah.
That serves no function other than to attract mates. Like it actually makes its life pretty shit. Like it makes it slow, like hard to hide. It's really super visible to predators and everything. Like it's investing a lot in that tail purely because it attracts mates.
Yes.
And gives it a better chance of reproducing. So that's what you call sexual selection. So examples of art. There are animals that do things in a similar way to that.
That actually involve
that are purely just to attract mates.
Yes.
Really. So there's a thing called the bowerbird.
I was about to say, okay. I was just about to say, in a way, like a peacock can't use tools, okay? It has like its tail, its plumage, and that's how it attracts partners. but with animals that can use more complex tools, like humans.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we'll talk about this in a bit, but like, if you're going to create art and things, there's probably some underlying or primitive driver, maybe only a small part of a primitive driver, in which by creating art in a human society, you are more likely to pass on your genetic material. As in, like, peacocks have feathers to show off their feathers. I suppose it's more about human bodies, though. Like, what human bodies look better. That's more analogous. Like,
that is. But I think there is there are analogy there.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm not saying that like all humans just make art to like get laid.
No.
But
or at least
But the behavior of creating art could possibly have emerged as a way of advertising creativity.
Yes.
And actually, like, I'll come back to the animal examples in a second. But actually, think about it. People who are artists, like famous artists. Well, the fact that such a thing exists anyway. Like some of the most famous people in the world are just artists, like musicians, actors, whatever. Like
anything, yeah.
These people have a lot of power and are looked up to and revered, and like some people find them attractive, whatever. Like, but
they're absolutely. They are objectively more attractive to the opposite sex of whatever sex they are, or the same sex.
Yeah.
Because of their standing in society, that is gained from their art, and therefore I have an easier time in terms of acquiring food and everything, and an easier time to acquire money. They tend to get very wealthy from it, and also, of course, they're more likely to mate.
Yeah, they are ultimately. Yeah,
straight up more. There are more attractive humans because of that.
Yeah. I think art in human society is probably more complex than the animal example.
No, it's just that there is some input, probably.
Yes, exactly. That's the right way.
I'm not sure the proportion of it in terms of, but that seems like that in terms of evolutionary biology, that makes total sense that there is a sort of sexual selection.
Yeah.
That there was a sexual selection going on in our ancestors that has led to this behaviour.
Yeah.
Being so prominent in human society.
So
or it has a contribution.
The thing about like advertising creativity. When you look at some of the animal examples, so bowerbirds, as I mentioned earlier, are basically
they are
like
nuts.
Yeah. So if you haven't heard of these things, just like Google them and look at the images, because they build these incredible structures to attract mates. Like the male bowerbirds build these like huge like sort of hut thing, like
made out of grass and stuff,
made out of sticks and grass, and then in front of
which isn't just a nest.
No, it's not a nest.
No,
they don't live in it.
No,
it's just there to like, hey, look how awesome I am. Look how creative I am.
Yes.
I guess in a way. Like how good I am at like arranging sticks.
They literally do that.
They get like coloured objects like flowers and seeds and things and like group them by colour.
They sort of make like a little kind of like garden. Like a human would make like a sort of pretty garden with flowers and stuff. They pick up like bottle tops.
They do, yeah.
And they have like, it's like sorted into colours, like different
colours.
colours.
Like it's all like meticulously sorted into colours.
Yeah.
And like there's videos of them doing it and they kind of like hop around in that really bird-like way, just sort of looking at everything. And then pick something up, it's not right there, I'm going to move it over here and just put it down again, like stand back and have a look. Like,
in a very, very similar way to which a human would paint or arrange a sculpture or paint a painting or something.
Yeah, and obviously this is much more like direct. Its impact on mating, reproductive success is much more direct. It's just like, okay, I made this, come and have sex with me, basically.
Yeah.
Which is not really what happens with art, human art. But human art might have emerged from the same kind of selection pressures that this behaviour in that bird has emerged from, even though it's much more complex and much more abstracted from it. And the reason it's much more complex and much more abstracted for it is probably just because we're much more complex animals and our society is much more complex.
Yeah.
And maybe there's also influences that art has other than just like making you more likely to mate or making you more like powerful in the society.
Exactly. Well, it helps knit together society. Like people become friends, or they find people who are like-minded through similar choices in liking music or liking films or lots of different aspects of like hobbies and things that are related to art and creativity. In a way, kind of helps maintain the sort of psychological health of society, helps knit it together.
Yeah. There's undeniable benefits in having like-minded individuals who share interests and will they basically become friends through this kind of thing, and they'll have each other's back and things like that. So
yeah. In a very complicated society like humans, then it ends up being a beneficial thing to have complex art systems, complex cultural diversity.
So something that could have potentially emerged through just sexual selection in its rudimentary beginnings gets reinforced by all these other beneficial effects that it has on society.
I mean, you go to film with see a film with friends that you all really like, and it makes you feel good. It kind of and it helps you. Maybe another thing about art, it helps art kind of reflects society. It helps you understand society.
Sure.
It's I think there's a saying that's something like. Art is not truth, but it helps you understand truth, or something like that.
Right.
And I think that's true. Satire, kind of lots of kind of political ideologies are expressed through art in places where they're maybe suppressed.
I can see that.
Films are hugely influential on in society's general choices and moral kind of development.
Absolutely, yeah.
So art probably plays a role as well in maintaining a kind of egalitarian society in which we are more accepting of people generally and more likely to select people on merit as opposed to what they look like.
Yeah.
Art helps integrate everyone in society so that the best people are allowed to, regardless of where they come from, maybe rise to where they should be in society.
Yeah.
As opposed to older. Maybe it helps something like that. That's to do with communication and loads of other things as well.
Yeah.
But certainly art contributes again in these different ways.
Probably
to the sort of lubricating society.
Yeah, to the gradual sort of moral kind of evolution of human society.
So what I guess we're arguing is that art is a beneficial thing to have in society, and that's why it exists.
Yes.
And it has its roots in kind of just sexual selection and these types of more basic parts of evolution. But when you get to a highly abstracted society, you end up with all sorts of other reinforcing functions.
Yeah, and it might be hard to trace the thread between a bowerbird building a little palace of sticks in order to find a mate.
It's not
to
just
trace the thread between that and I don't know, the Beatles or something.
Yeah,
might be a really hard mental leap to make.
Yeah,
but I think we are arguing that there is a process there in the emergence of those two behaviours that was similar.
That was definitely similar.
Yeah.
So in terms of saying, does art separate is art a totally uniquely human thing?
Trait.
I'm not sure you can entirely separate those behaviours from animals.
Yeah.
There's nothing entirely unique about the behaviour as such, as in its roots. But I guess nothing is. But in terms of there are the odd example. We certainly have it. We certainly exhibit artistic behaviour, unlike any other species.
Absolutely, way more complex, way more rich and diverse, and beyond its possible original sort of purposes.
Yes, like the way a peacock's feathers is beyond its original purposes.
Yeah, but it's not. Because the fact that you can sort of trace it back to its beneficial evolutionary roots means that it's not just something that's just appeared in humans that would never existed in anything else.
Yes.
It has a history. It's emerged in the same way that every other behavior has.
The other thing about art and culture is that if we think about non-human species, many. Things like Neanderthals displayed culture. I mean, I suppose they're human in a way.
Yeah, kind of. I guess they represent the closest to us in that gradational kind of boundary.
Yeah.
It's not even really a boundary, but out of that kind of list of really similar human-like species, they are probably the closest to us.
Yeah, and so you can see that kind of development of art happening in more rudimentary, less complex ways as you get towards humans back in the ancestors and closely related species that have died out now in humans. You don't really see it in terms of. I don't think there's any evidence of like true art in chimps and those kinds of things. You know, people teach monkeys how to paint and stuff, but they're not really.
That's not really like a chimpanzee behavior. It's like a human behavior been taught to a chimp.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just copying. Basically.
No, you don't, which is interesting. You know, it shows that there wasn't really a need for them to be like that, which in itself is kind of slightly puzzling.
But there are cultural traits and things, like art's about culture as well, isn't it? Kind of, about a passing and trading culture and stuff. And so different troops of chimps behave in certain ways that I suppose it's probably not art, but they display their kind of creativity in different ways depending on which troops of chimps.
Yeah. And the fact that you don't see it so much in chimps, that maybe is an argument that the sexual selection side of it is just a small part of it. Like you would expect to see it maybe more in groups of animals like that if it was purely just explained by sexual selection.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know. I mean, it's a very complex thing to get your head around.
It is.
And it might just be that you reach a certain level of, either certain size or certain level of complexity in social groups where suddenly, like, you've hit a threshold. Now it becomes like really super beneficial to have this like outlet and like advert of creativity.
Yeah, I mean, it might be that we're talking. If you think about like a non-civilization building organism and a civilization building organism, like a civilization building organism may have to like evolve these more complex artistic things in order to, for at that level of complexity. We were sort of talking about this earlier. For society to work in a way that's psychologically healthy, and simply because nothing else has got to that level, we don't see that, but we still see the origins of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
So basically, what we're saying is, there was no like magic kind of like art is like a uniquely human thing. It's just a trait that's a far more like extrapolated from animals, and we do see like bowerbirds. I mean, they really. Yeah, those things look like pieces of art. Yeah, like they literally look like pieces of art. It's not like they're kind of just doing the same thing every time. They all do like different versions of it. They sit back and kind of like rearrange things and look. And it's if there is any input from sexual selection into human art, then the thing that bowerbirds do is exactly the same essentially as that input. And there is probably a reasonable, like a significant input in sexual selection in art, and therefore it's not really uniquely human. It's just uniquely human to have been this complicated.
And it's amazing. We said this before, but it's amazing how much power doing art can give you in human society. Like the fact that we revere artists more than actual like real leaders, you know.
Exactly. So people like politicians are generally not thought of as highly as someone's favorite artist. Even things like scientists or engineers or
people who have actually contributed massively to like human development, human sort of progress.
Sure, people will say yes, of course, you know, a scientist doing cancer research is more important than a pop star. But like in terms of their day-to-day life, like which stories are they reading about, what media are they consuming, where they're spending more time, most people, researching or not researching, but kind of reading about and consuming, and talking about. Really, that's the key thing. Communicating about creative people, not talking about obscure. You know, people will get into. Well, there's lots of different types of people, but
So that you just have these. Art gives you power. In human society, influence. As well, which could also be part of its.
If you're talking about that like intelligence arms race, being a better, more creative, like in the early days of, you know, when living in caves and stuff, it would help you climb that social hierarchy ladder. In terms of other things that are like kind of tricky, kind of art-like behaviours that we see in humans, that people use to differentiate humans and animals, maybe like religion is one. That kind of like ritualistic behaviour.
So what? Tricky. What is religion really? Like, what is it? Is it a way of trying to explain like the world, the universe?
Yeah.
Is that what it actually is, like fundamentally? or is it something else like a?
I think it's a mixture of two things.
Yeah, maybe.
I think it's a mixture of what you just said.
Yeah.
And also about kind of cultural identity and kind of behaviors within.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so it's probably So it probably emerged in like in like proto-humans, like early human groups, or something like similar to it, as a way of like keeping a group cohesive and
exactly, yeah,
like common, again, like we're talking about like common ground, like
yeah, it's exactly. So it's about like tribalism.
Yeah.
In a way.
Exactly.
It's
yeah.
about like creating identifiable cultural traits
Yes.
with your own like people or
Yeah.
your own like organisms.
Yeah.
People that are like-minded and that support you in a way. In some ways, and it has overlaps into art as well in terms of its kind of, in terms of what it is and its function in society.
Yeah.
You could argue it's more like divisive than art.
Yeah,
but it's
maybe there was a time when having divisions between groups was
beneficial
probably
to
beneficial.
Yeah.
Because
might be
above
about
a certain size group, like you can't support them through hunter-gatherer like methods.
Yeah.
So it was good to have like a reason to like fight the other group, because good to have a reason to like not trust them, or to like just kind of consider them like less than human, I guess. Like that's the way that the
less
old
important
school,
than you,
less important than you,
than your like close relatives.
Yeah, like Old Testament sort of crazy old Bible stuff about like kill the Amalekites and stuff. Like that kind of like, it's fine. You can justify like killing other humans if you think that they're like less, like not part of like God or the God's plan or whatever. And
in a way, therefore, it's kind of about social order as well.
Yes.
About creating rules that can't be broken, and therefore helping society in its early days maybe function in that way.
Yeah.
Function like properly, because again, it's like maybe you go down like an anarchy route. It's like so I'm not saying, what I'm definitely not saying is that without those kind of like religious undertones, you would have like a totally immoral anarchistic society.
Sure. No, of course.
Because a lot of those religious things were built on like our more fundamental kind of like emotions and morals and altruism.
Something like the moral code or whatever that governs like our interactions.
Yeah.
Probably is underneath. Like religion is like something that sits on top of it,
or sits, or that's one of the contributing things that what religion forms.
Yeah.
So it also comes from less nice places in terms of like not just emotions, but like controlling like one individual trying to control others.
Yes. It's quite useful
for its
that.
own benefit.
Yeah.
So in a way, although there's no direct like, there are analogues in the animal world, but not real. There's obviously no like religious like crows or whatever. But like
that would be mad.
There's no evidence of primates or other apes doing like true, like what you would describe as like blatantly obviously religious.
Yeah, like superstitious kind of like belief in something, exhibiting like belief in something that like
there might be superstitious in a way. In like placing hopes and dreams into an individual that doesn't have those hopes and dreams. But exactly what those are is, they probably don't. There's no evidence of animals thinking that one of their own, or there's like a higher power to the world or whatever necessarily. I mean, they just kind of try and work with their environment.
Yeah, but you're right. There like in like, again, like chimp groups and stuff. You have like a leader.
Yes.
That, I mean, is a chimp, right?
Yes.
It's just another one of the chimps, but that has, because of their standing in the group, has like, the others look up to them as having almost like godlike abilities in some ways.
Yes, and you mean that in like, not literally, they're not thinking the chimp's going to start like causing lightning strikes and stuff.
But okay, all I mean by that is that leader chimp is capable of protecting them in a way that possibly he's not capable of doing.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a placement of hope into, or kind of security over the top, over the odds of what the actual reality is.
Yeah.
So a chimp might, they might think of this chimp can protect them against almost anything, like it's
lightning or something.
Yeah. Well, so you literally see behavior in chimps that during lightning storms and things, you'll have the dominant like male, and it tends to be the male in these types of the biggest, most
male.
aggressive animal. It will do like bizarre behaviors during like lightning strikes, where it will be all the other chimps will be hiding under trees and like sheltering, whereas the dominant male will be going like crazy, like trying to like tear trees down.
Yeah, like sort of showing the storm who's boss, basically.
In a way, because everything else is cowering, you could see it as a stretch, and maybe that the analog is closer to something like how we like political like leaders and things, as in like, but it's not really closer to like democratically elected leaders. It's closer to is like cults of personality, like dictatorship of cults of personality. Like you see in sort of like North Korea.
Yes.
And those cults of personality, they engender beliefs, superstitious beliefs about those leaders.
Yes. And maybe that comes from the same sort of capacity in human. In the human brain, human consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, that religion does, kind of like the projecting. I mean, this is all kind of a bit of a stretch, but projecting that kind of like belief that this person or being or whatever has powers that can influence your life and like, I don't know, like protect you, keep you safe, or the opposite, like, you know, unleash like vengeance on you in some way or something like that. So yeah, you're right. It might be more analogous to like cult of personality leaders.
Yes.
But it's possible that need to kind of believe in that kind of like supreme power.
Yes, exactly.
Comes from the same place as religion.
And also in chimps you find that aspect, that's one aspect of religion, of course.
Yeah.
But the other aspect is kind of like revering the universe. Yeah. And you see ritualistic behaviors in chimps and things. If they get to certain like waterfall and spots that they're not like short on water or anything, but they'll behave in very like sort of almost tribal like ceremonial ways, and they'll kind of do like strange like swinging patterns, get very excitable, and they go to this like watering hole at, like, you know, every day at a certain time and do these kinds of things. Yeah, and again, it's
almost like
that
kind of giving thanks to the water hole.
Yeah,
which is a
obviously a stretch to say they're giving thanks, but what they're actually doing is like a very early way of kind of a very primitive kind of tribal behavior, like a tribal sort of ritualistic behavior. Yeah, and so that kind of I don't know if the real like true reverence for the universe really exists. You maybe never tell that with chimps, but certainly an excitement that goes along with certain natural phenomenons that are non-biological. Yeah, and therefore those things feed into what religion kind of is in humans, or a placement, or like a beneficial placement in believing that a higher power is able to help you through your life. Yeah, it's a psychological health thing. Yeah.
So I mean, and even without these possible very very faint analogies in animals, even without that. It's kind of easy or logical to see how religious traits might evolve in human populations.
Yes, exactly. So in higher, again, in terms of human-related ancestors, Neanderthals, and further back, it certainly showed rudimentary superstitious, kind of tribal behaviours. Yeah. I mean, for example, there's even some evidence that Naledi, the Homo.
The one where they found loads of skeletons in that cave in South Africa.
Yes,
they've obviously been burying their dead there.
Yeah, it's not agreed in the anthropological world whether that is actually what was happening. But they basically, that's one of the considerations. The people so essentially what they did is they found like a cave, which contained a load of bones, and the bones were all in one place, and there was no environmental evidence in any of the geology, any of the sediments that suggested they were like washed there by a flood or they all died at once, and it was they're all skeletons of one particular hominid,
a non-human sort of primate.
Yeah, exactly. It may be a direct ancestor of us, it may not be. I don't think it's thought that it is a direct ancestor, but it had a common ancestor not that long ago with us. And it was like a rudimentary human. And this was way before we expected any like cultural behaviors to be present in non-humans.
Yeah, like these kind of complex
hominids.
cultures.
They seem to be. The suspicion is that they were ritually burying their dead in this cave. So, even if that's not true, but there's certainly these types of behaviors existed before anatomically modern humans existed.
Yeah.
In proto-humans.
Yeah. Sure.
So they're absolutely an evolutionary thing. It's just whether can you separate humans from animals with that one distinction
based on just religion?
Is you can separate them in terms of obviously the religion and those behaviors are far more complex, but you can't really separate them in terms of it's not like there's nothing again like imbued into humans that's obviously not present in any other animal.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe even calling it religion is already like because religion is quite a specific.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Religion
You've
maybe
probably
is
already made the problem for yourself because
Yeah.
you're asking the wrong question.
Yeah, that is possibly the wrong question. So like religion is the human manifestation of this trait.
These particular number of traits, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
these numbers of traits,
Yeah.
And especially as the human brain began to get more complex and we were capable of understanding the world more, it was easier to have like explanations for things by like just imagining them or like invoking like this higher power that
and also easier to keep
believe in.
social order and
Yeah, exactly.
and also
so it kills lots of birds with one stone basically.
And art
this
again.
trait.
I mean, you bring people together. It wasn't just about social control, but it was about social cohesion. In early days when it was, when people were less civilized in a way. Religion again, a bit like art, seems to have there's a gradational boundary. It's not like we don't see anything that contributes to art or religion in animals.
And it's not something that was just suddenly appeared in humans. I mean, it does seem to have like a thread that you can trace back, like an evolutionary history.
What about in terms of I suppose this is more basic, but like concept of like being like yourself, like a concept of
do you mean like
well, I suppose we see in animals, don't we? Lots of animals like recognize them. Some animals can recognize themselves in mirrors, right?
Yeah,
so there's a standard test that's done on. I can't remember what it's called.
They like paint a dot on them or to stick a sticker on them or something.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. And if the animal sees itself in the mirror and realizes that it's got this like dot on them and they try and get it off, then they pass that test, I think.
So they'll do something like and to control for it properly, they'll have like an orangutan or something.
Yeah.
And they'll like take 5 orangutans or one orangutan multiple times or whatever, and they'll get a pen and stick a dot on its head.
Yeah.
Okay. And then like maybe an hour later they'll show the orangutan in a mirror. Its reflection.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll have simply used a pen that doesn't work, so there's no dot on the orangutan's head.
And it's just like,
just looks at it, bored. I think orangutans can pass this. Maybe not orangutans, but whatever apes can pass it. Certain apes can pass it.
Yeah.
And if they'll look at themselves, the animals can pass it, and start trying to wipe the dot off their head.
If it's there.
Yeah. If it's not there, they won't.
Yeah.
Animals that can pass it. So things like it's apes, magpies. Isn't it?
Magpies. I think some really weird animals have passed it, like ants.
Yes, ants can pass it, which is really surprising.
Yeah, like an ant will look in the mirror and be like, "Oh, that's me. Oh, I've got a dot on my head."
Well, yeah. So they'll again do the same thing, put a touch of ink on like the mandible of the ant, and it will start trying to clean it off if it looks at its own reflection, which is mental.
Which is really crazy. Because quite a lot of animals don't, like much higher intelligent animals than ants.
Dogs don't do it.
Don't tend to do it. Dogs, show a dog itself in the mirrir and it's just like
it might bark
at it and try and attack
most dogs
it,
are just totally bored by it.
But they're not really picking up on the fact that it's them at all.
Yeah.
So that's a weird trait.
It definitely there's definitely.
Is that a concept of self though? I mean, what I mean is it possible to have a concept of self like it's a bit of a grey area topic, but almost I guess what I'm almost getting at is like consciousness. We'll get onto that in a minute, I think.
No, we talk about that now. Really, I mean,
yeah.
Obviously, in terms of the mirror test, there seems to be in terms of that particular measurement of self. there's no boundary between humans and animals.
Yeah,
there's lots of animals
absolutely
that can do it,
not.
lots of humans that can do it.
Yeah.
And in fact, humans aren't able to pass that test until they're about 24 months old.
Oh right, yeah, okay.
So when they're younger, they can't pass that.
Which is human babies are useless.
Yeah, they do like weird.
They're basically just fetuses. I mean, that's essentially what they are. Our development, our birth development, like backtracked loads as our heads grew, because of our brain sizes.
Yes,
because
we needed to give birth to a head to come out.
Exactly. It's exactly right. So you needed to give birth to like younger and younger fetuses.
Yeah, or more
so like human babies are just
useless,
like, totally dependent, useless kind of.
So it takes them a while to acquire that ability.
Yeah.
It's quite old. I mean, I think they start showing it at like 18 months or something, and then by like 20 to 24 months, it's something like 50-60% of them are then able to recognize themselves and pass that test. But anyway, that's not, like you're saying, that's not the concept of self.
Yeah, so self-awareness maybe is a better way of putting it than consciousness itself. But like the idea that,
and this is getting really like philosophical. We're going to try and treat it in a very objective, scientific way.
Yeah.
But you do have to think about it in terms of logical kind of philosophy in some cases, because there's not much hard data to go on.
Sure.
You just have to use analogies and things.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so this idea that consciousness or self-awareness is the thing, is the crux of being human.
Yes, I think that there's no reason to suspect that if you look back at human evolutionary history, you go back to like we were talking about these different hominids that we came from. There's no reason, it makes absolutely no sense, evolutionary speaking, that at some point like a human became conscious. That it is just a gradational boundary. That these kind of intelligence arms race that we talked about the week before led to an increasingly complex set of understanding of yourself in society, yourself in the universe, etc., etc. At no point was there like an imbuement of consciousness into the human mind.
No.
And that consciousness isn't like a physical force as such, and therefore because of that, you simply trace that line back. A human brain and human conscious experience simply traces all the way back to what a bacteria does. That it is, but it's highly, highly evolved from that. Of course, like significantly evolved.
If you think about what actually a conscious brain is, a set of inputs, so sight, sound, smells, touch, whatever, are going in and being processed, and a reaction is being produced based on them. And the processing side of that, obviously in humans, has become vastly complex in the way that we are now able to imagine other inputs. We're able to like abstract and think about concepts that aren't immediately just being displayed to us. But that, what I've just described, inputs, processing and outputs, is fundamentally the same as what a bacterium will do, as it senses its environment and reacts to that.
Yeah, and
the processing in a bacterium is obviously just a cascade of chemical reactions.
Yeah.
But at no point between the kind of primitive single-celled organisms 4 billion years ago and us can you define a point at which suddenly it's no longer just reacting to stimuli, and now it's conscious. There's no point in that gradation where suddenly that happens. Even like rudimentary animals that were multicellular, moved around and stuff, as nervous systems began to develop, all those nervous systems were doing was starting to centralize stimuli, centralize the processing of stimuli. And that's all a brain ever has been. And so as you were saying earlier, it's impossible to like find that point. Because there isn't a point at which consciousness, because consciousness is consciousness, what we're experiencing is essentially just a very, 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 very complex, highly evolved version of processing, reacting to stimuli. And
consequently, that would not we wouldn't consider that to be a difference between an animal like an ape and us, particularly. Again, same thing. It's a highly evolved process. It's a highly evolved. Ours is a much more complex version. Is all.
Yeah.
That's all we're sort of saying, I suppose.
Yeah, and if you think about that a lot, like it does blow your mind a little bit.
So if we're thinking about a sort of summary then,
Yeah.
or kind of thinking about, we've said definitely, we consistently said throughout this
Yeah.
that there is a difference between humans and animals.
Yes.
But everything that is different is simply like because we have a more advanced version of what they have.
There's no like fundamental like magic ingredient basically.
No,
it's all like some gradational increase, and in some cases quite a dramatic increase in various like behavioral traits. So stuff like art and religion. For
What I was
example.
about to say was we talked about in a previous episode about the sort of intelligence arms race and stuff.
Yeah.
But like in thinking more fundamentally, what is it about these things that have evolved to a higher level in us that makes us so different to other species of animal?
Yeah.
What of these particular traits we've talked about in humans is honed to a much higher degree than it is in other animals? What are the like real like key things that have made us so different?
Yeah.
And enabled us to between a non-civilization building and a civilization building.
Yeah, and that's the key thing is that like the premise of the episode, what separates us from animals. I mean, we've consistently said like no, whatever, but if you look at the Earth, like we stand out. We massively stand out. So there is a huge difference, seemingly, in like what we do to the planet and what everything else does to the planet. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. And so obviously, like the premise of it is like we are civilization building.
Yeah, so that's it. The crucial thing is that we built a civilization, and no other animal has ever done that.
No.
So what is it? So returning to the question that you just asked, like the kind of summing up like question, like what is it?
Yeah.
That's allowed that.
There's probably a few. Obviously, there's like lots of different like these different traits have helped us, but I think there's really two key ones.
And it's two. It's a conjunction of the two.
Absolutely.
That causes it.
The fact that we can communicate.
Yeah.
That we developed very highly advanced communication tools.
Yeah.
Basically, obviously because of like our brains, etc. But in terms of these things, we're trying to differentiate ourselves with animals between. In terms of our behavioural traits, that we have very advanced language, and so we can talk through and think about using problems within like problem solving.
Yeah, problem solving. Just
with
like
other
better
animals,
ways of doing things. Yeah,
with other species.
Yeah,
other species.
Other
with
members
humans.
of the same species. Yeah, other humans. So it's a complex language basically,
which allows us to solve problems using other people's like talents and things. But key to that happens in other animals, but obviously not to the same degree. But the fact that we can then record information and pass it down through generations and not just have it like held in people's brains like cultural information.
Yeah, that's the crucial thing, because suddenly what the information that like any one human can use in their lifetime is not limited by the capacity of one human's brain.
Yes.
You can draw on the recorded knowledge of all humans and all humans that have come before you.
Yes, and therefore, and doing that is a use of tools.
Yeah, so it's a use of tools, specifically using tools
to record
language.
Yeah, exactly.
So being able to observe something, see what happens, and write down what happened, so that the next generation can read that, and the next generation come into that same situation already having that knowledge.
Yeah,
and that does happen in the animal kingdom, and did happen in early humans before written language, in the sense that like animals teach their young how to hunt or how to find berries or whatever. Yeah,
or like we're saying, like cultural things, like orcas learn how certain cultures of orcas have learned how to hunt sharks, for example, in certain ways, and they've passed that down to their young, and they learn to do it, and they improve that. But the problem is, as soon as they're lost, as soon as the individuals in that, they can only hold so much in their brains. Yeah, you can't hold like the entire detail of just like one PhD thesis in like a normal human's brain without like years of trying to learn one thing. And there's billions of not billions of PhD theses, but like loads of them.
I mean, like that's the thing.
You can't hold the entirety of human knowledge or knowledge of any species just as a memory bank. You have to have like a truly kind of permanent way of then like cataloging and centralizing all that information,
centralizing and sharing it, and like that, and the fact that science is that. That is what science is. It's built on this. Yeah. You're just constantly building up knowledge, and any now doing science, you're building on knowledge that has taken centuries of thousands, millions of humans amassing like a big body of knowledge to get to this point, and now you're just building on it now.
Standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, exactly. That has allowed us to exploit and change our environment far more than any other animal has ever been able to do. Even though some of the other animals are very close in ability to us in terms of like apes and chimps and stuff.
Yeah.
In terms of like their brain capacity and things, they just lack that fundamental ability to be able to record, use tools to record their observations.
Which is a consequence, obviously, of their biology. That they don't.
It is. Yeah, they just haven't quite got to that.
And their brains aren't big enough to have ever done it and stuff. They haven't evolved the hardware you need to run those. Yeah. That software.
Yeah. So it's not like suddenly there was a species born onto the Earth that was capable of building New York City and flying to the moon.
Yeah.
It's that there was a species that started to emerge that was capable of recording their discoveries and observations.
Yeah.
And that has led to this explosion in ability and technology and New York City and going to the moon and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's that if anything, that's the thing that separates humans and animals.
Yeah.
If there is a separation, that's the separation.
Yeah. And that makes it sound and as we've been saying all the way through this, that it's gradational and that really there isn't much really that separates us.
There's no underlying all that statement, as in that is what separates us. There's nothing mechanically different about what builds us up to that point. From animals, it's just that we've got a confluence of these different things that have allowed us to develop that particular. So that's like the step change. So for example, if you take like photosynthesis, development of photosynthesis, like producing oxygen, like the organism that evolved into the thing that produced oxygen wasn't that like biologically, physiologically different.
Yeah, sure.
But some small changes suddenly allowed it to start producing oxygen and had a huge effect on the globe.
Effect on everything from like geology, like the composition of the atmosphere, the composition of the oceans, like the types of minerals you see deposited in the geological record,
the types of life that then use that oxygen,
and then the explosion of multicellular life and things that happened after.
Exactly. In the same way that those mechanical biochemical features allowed something to produce oxygen, the combination of certain brain sizes, problem-solving abilities, social groups, everything biology describes humans and differentiates them from apes, allowed us to suddenly have that ability to use tools and communicate and record language, crucially, and pass it down over generations, which led to an exponential increase in the technological development. Which has ended up in iPhones, YouTube.
Exactly, and it's arguably as significant an impact on the planet as something like photosynthesis.
Yes,
so that's actually quite a good analogy. In many ways, like the mechanism behind it being simple and the effect being absolutely massive.
Yes.
I say simple. Obviously, the mechanisms aren't simple in either of those examples, but
they are just built on from
yes, it's just an incremental change from what was already there.
But a huge step change in evolution.
Yeah.
Right, we put the world to rights.
That's it, done.
Let's talk about crazy people.
Yeah, because that's always fun.
Yes. So it's your turn.
Yeah, it is my turn. And a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about flat Earth conspiracies, which was good fun.
So this is Nutters of the Week.
This is Nutters of the Week, yeah. So we're now not talking about consciousness and stuff anymore.
No.
We're now talking about hollow Earth conspiracies, because I was looking into this, and this is great. Like, really good. Like, I think if I'd come across this when I was a kid, I would have been like, maybe not into it, like buying into it, but just like fascinated by the idea of it. Because it's like, it's the kind of thing that you might see in like a fantasy book or something, and it's kind of a weird thing. But there's whole communities of people out there that are into this. And if anything,
sorry, what is it?
I will just explain now. If anything, it's actually like a bigger community than the flat Earth people.
Right.
So the hollow Earth theory is that the Earth is hollow. But not just that, is that it has a sun in the middle.
What?
An internal sun, right? and that the inner surface of the
What?
Earth is covered in land and oceans and stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a civilization in there called the Agarthans, I think.
Why do they always? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, really detailed.
Why is there a sun in the middle of the Earth?
Because obviously,
So what are they saying? Are they saying there's like a sun, and then it was like a sort of sphere built by these aliens that we now live on the surface of?
I don't think. No. I think it's meant to be natural. It's meant to be natural somehow. Don't ask me how it forms. But there's a hole at either poles, right?
Where the magnetic field.
And people pull out Google images to show that this hole really exists. But there's a hole, and like the ocean like goes in and then wraps around onto the inside. There's diagrams of this, right? There's diagrams that show the Earth, the crust of the Earth, having like being double-sided. So the surface and then the inner surface, and then the center of gravity is in like the middle of the crust, so that you get like pulled to the ground on either. It doesn't matter which side of it you stood on. And in the hole, you sail round like the ocean that wraps around into the interior. And people have been on trips over there, and like there's whole groups of people that regale their stories of like traveling to the inner Earth and like meeting the Agarthans and stuff. It's like it's a developed community. It's
Right.
it's mad.
I mean, that's fucking stupid.
Yeah, and there's also the other thing is that there's
that makes no sense with. I mean, obviously, it makes no sense with any understanding of like how planets develop, solar systems develop, understanding of gravity. Everything would be sucked towards the sun in the middle.
Yeah.
Forget about the crusty bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know what to say about that because.
I mean, I'll show you a little diagram here. I mean, for people who aren't looking, as I was saying before, it literally is just a diagram of like.
Sorry, what's the green bit?
The green bit is the continent that you find on the inside of the Earth, like that.
Oh,
like
right,
that.
yeah.
And there's the inner sun, but also what you find is that there's cave systems that connect the surface world to the inner surface world, and you find them in like the Great Pyramids and all this stuff. So it like ties in all these like conspiracies about like the ancient Egyptians and like all this other stuff.
Why do
being
people
pulled
get
in.
Into this sort of thing?
I don't know.
It's the same mystery.
It's the same mystery, and there's plenty of. I mean, you can go on into infinity finding these kind of conspiracy theories, but I think this one is particularly great because it's just so well developed. Like there's like a spaceport in there, I think, as well.
I mean, I don't want to. I'm not. I mean, these people can believe what they want, and that's fine. It's just, and obviously, that's not true. But like, I'm not going to say they're crazy, but I can criticize the idea, and the idea is fucking shit and retarded and stupid, and they should not be. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. If you think there's a hole in the top of the Earth, you should just go to Antarctica, and obviously they're claiming they have. But
well, there's some people claiming they have, like maybe like a handful ever,
right?
And that all the other people base their like views on these anecdotal like stories, in the same way that like UFO believers will base their beliefs on a couple of like abduction stories they've heard, rather than like the bucket loads of evidence of like satellite pictures of the North Pole and like people who go there like consistently every year.
I know. We know loads of people who go to the Antarctic frequently to do research.
Yeah. But so they'll say that they're part of the cover up and stuff,
Just these layers of like of just Occam's razor it.
Yeah, exactly. You need a healthy dose of that razor.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway,
slightly irritating.
Irritating, but I mean, it makes a good like.
It's good shit though.
Yeah, it's good shit. But the concept of it, would be perfectly at home in like a sci-fi or like a
it's good fun.
Like a fantasy novel or something.
But to think that's what reality is.
Yeah.
When it's so clearly not.
Yeah, it's a weird trait that humans have, right?
It is a weird trait.
Conspiracy. It's like need to like want to. I don't know.
Believe in something more. Is it similar to any of the stuff we've been talking about?
I'm not sure. It's possibly like it's a facet of a certain subset of humans, I guess. That
it's like
I said when we talk about
cultish behavior.
Yeah, when I was talking about the flat Earth thing a few weeks ago, I think I said then that like maybe some people just have a need to feel like they're in on a secret that that other people don't know, that they have the core truth of it, and that everyone else is deluded.
Yes.
Maybe there's like some psychological reason behind that. I don't know.
But
But anyway,
maybe they're right.
maybe they that's it. I mean, science should be totally open to that. If it's just that the evidence for it is particularly terrible.
Oh, it's yeah. It's not only that there's no evidence for it. It's not even there's a lack of evidence.
There's an absolute like shed load of evidence.
There's a whole
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's the end of that.
That's the end of that
So
show. Thank you very much for watching as ever.
And if you've got comments, hopefully there'll be some comments about what we've been talking about today. So if you've got comments, then let us know.
If it was coherent.
Yeah, if it made any sense at all, let us know.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And we'll hopefully reply to a few more of them.
Yeah.
And thanks for listening.
Thank you.
It's been fun.
Okay.
Cheers.
See you later.